What lessons have you learned from such disparate leaders?
Yeah, I think disparate leaders and different lessons. Although I will tell you, I'm sort of thinking about this now for the first time. I actually think, in some way, they speak to a better place than we've been, and a time I hope we can get back to, where leadership was about finding ways to get to meaningful common ground outcomes, as opposed to sharpening our divisions and scoring points, which I think is the biggest contrast between two of those and their current successor in Washington. But they were different. From Ed Rendell, for whom I worked when I was much younger, I think and he's responsible for sort of a lot of my public career. And I think above all, what I learned is the power of persistence and determination. I saw him as mayor fairly up close. I saw him at the Constitution Center. I started working for him when he was a 17-1, rated 70-1 against odds of winning the nomination.
People forget that Peter Hearn was the favorite.
Correct. Ed Rendell had and has a never say die, utter sheer persistence quality that over and over again, I saw him in public life will good things into being. And I remember all the times he pushed me, where I was wrong, at dark moments in the Constitution Center's history. And I think some of that rubbed off. I mean, that's one of my sort of operating principles. From President Bush, whom I worked with at the Constitution Center, who was an extraordinary man. Above all, the power of decency and kindness. The story about him is the handwritten notes he used to send, which I think often gets retailed as a kind of this was his political gimmick. I used to say he was the most decent public figure I'd ever met. And then I sort of revised that. He was simply among the 2 or 3 most decent people I've ever met in my life. He found out some staffer at the Constitution Center he'd never met that her father had died and sent her a condolence note. We had a board meeting in Texas in the 88-degree heat. And he spent a good, 9 hours working for us, and all the board members and all the donors were gone. And the only people left were the staff of the Constitution Center. And he stood out in the Texas heat calling until everyone got a taxi to get back to the airport. He heard at a board meeting a report on contributions. We told him, when we got him on board, we told him didn't have to give any money, didn't have to do any of that. He heard a report on contributions, and I could see the little light go off in his head. And he scurried out of the boardroom, went up to his apartment, came back with his checkbook, and wrote a substantial check. And I said, Mr. President, we told you didn't have to. He said, well, I didn't understand. I said, it's not something I have to, it's something I want to do. I want to lead by example. The number of stories I don't even remember them all, with a kind of just good humor and kindness, just an abiding kindness to people, across every rank and station. It was really quite remarkable. It will always stay with me. I'd like to say that it's rubbed off. People working with me might say it hasn't. I try to remember it, and it will stick with me for the rest of my life. And from President Obama, with whom I worked, as part of his administration, and I'm amazingly proud of that. I did not work as closely as I did with the other two, but I actually saw things from sort of a 30,000-foot view. And from him, I think the importance of grace and patience and kind of a peaceful quality in the hurly-burly of politics and public affairs. He just exuded. I would see him come to the UN every year, a fairly hostile environment. And with all the slings and arrows, he just sort of exuded an American presence that was who I thought we were, who I hope will be again. who we haven't been in a while, but a kind of a dignity and a grace that is who I imagine a president should be.